As Douglas Adams so astutely tells us in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, space is big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, if you think it's a long way down the road to the chemist, it's just peanuts to space. In fact, space is far enough away that only 3 countries have managed to send people there: the US, Russia, and China. By looking at where China's space program has gone in the past and what they're doing today, we can get a short-range prediction for where they're probably going to go in the future. So where is space now, and what's China doing? Well, up until now, the US has been pretty much the leader in everything space ever since we went to the moon. But we're kind of stagnating. The shuttle's on the out. It's going to be replaced in a few years. We're going to have some time when we can't go to space. We won't have a vehicle. NASA's big and bureaucratic and kind of slow-moving. There's not really much going on. As Jeff Faust, editor and publisher of the Space Review, says, in the United States, we're teaching aerospace engineers how to use 20 to 40-year-old technology. Mr. Faust voices an interesting point about the elderly US space program. Why, if we're looking to move ahead, are we teaching people how to use old material? It just doesn't make sense. Really, the only interesting thing that's happened in space in the US recently is the advent of privatized space travel. The X Prize, put on by a group called the X Prize Foundation, is a contest that ended a few years ago for a privately funded and operated group, independent of any government, to send a man or woman 62.1 miles up into space twice in a 2-week period. And it was won by a company called Scaled Composites with this magnificent and bizarre aircraft, actually with this, which fell off of the overall kind of hawk-like plane and went up into space. It was really cool to see. More recently, and kind of more locally, there's something called the Google Moon Challenge, which is put on by the same X Prize Foundation for a private group, independent of any government, to send a rover to the moon, all the way to the moon, and then drive around and take pictures and video, which is incredible. Almost no one's done that, and that is looking to happen in the next few years. So what's China specifically done in space? Well, mostly they've launched satellites. Since 1970, when they had their first launch, they've had a 90% success rate with their 47 Sense launches. Also, they made themselves the 3rd country to launch a man into orbit a few years ago with the Shenzhou 5 rocket, which is a pretty incredible accomplishment. With a solid record of success, China has a good reason to set its hopes as high as, well, the moon sometime in the future, near future. So what's China doing now? Well, they're still launching satellites. Mostly, they're building a telecom network for their internal use and the use of others. They're also setting up a navigation satellite network similar to GPS or GLONASS for the Russians. And they're building a long-term Earth observation system that will include things like weather monitoring and Earth imaging. Also, in the next few years, they're looking to send an unmanned probe to the moon. This is a prototype mock-up of their rover, nuclear-powered, interestingly enough, which they plan to send up in the next probably 5 to 10 years. Then, by 2020 or 2030, they're estimating they'll be able to put a man on the moon, which is an incredible feat. No one else can do that right now. Overall, China's rise to significant power in space could ripple out like a pebble dropped in a pond, causing a pretty reasonable shift in international politics. As I mentioned, the US is the big driving factor, but if China can send something to the moon, that could all shift. The big question really is, will this be like the Cold War? Will there be another space race? As Xinhua, the official press agency of the People's Republic of China, writes in the China Daily News, China is proceeding in space in a very methodical, deliberative manner and seems uninterested in competing with the US in spaceflight in any major way. My research about Xinhua indicates that it's pretty much the primary propaganda artery for China, so this might not be exactly on the level, as it were. It's a little disarming, and that's especially true when we look at what we see from Mr. Faust again. He says, the posturing between nations is reminiscent of Cold War discussions with the former Soviet Union. Mr. Faust's observations are interesting to note, especially because he's an outside analyst. So what he's saying might be a little more on the level, a little more what we're looking at. It's the truth. Interestingly enough, China's been adhering to the UN policy on international spaceflight. They've been peacefully developing their use of space resources to benefit all mankind. They've been sharing their developments and their discoveries with others. They've allowed joint use of their launch resources, and they've protected the space environment by not dumping too much trash and such. China is just starting on its path to orbital success, but the future looks bright. With new technology and a fresh outlook on space travel, they're set to make waves. Their rapid progress will probably stir up the hornet's nest of international politics, resulting in either China being alienated, maybe another Cold War, or a strengthening of bonds between them and the rest of the world. In the end, whenever China goes into space, they're on the rise, literally. Thank you.